Hello, everyone. D. Alfred Ostrowski. And in this recording, I'm going to be doing a demonstration of how to deploy a Node.js application to Heroku. I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to be doing this demo directly from an AWS EC2 instance in the same exact fashion that I've done a lot of other demonstrations. And I've been using the same configuration for this particular demonstration as well. And we're starting from scratch. I have an EC2 instance up already, C5, and I already have, as you see here in the inset, a client set up. If you want to know those exact steps by which I did to get to this point, you might want to look at some earlier videos, but I'm going to have this documented. And of course, you can look at some of the earlier videos with AppTest Blockchain and be able to see exactly what I did to get to that point. But for brevity, take it to the point of having the EC2 instance up and running. And I found some problems with installation of some of the software on free tier instance. So for that reason, I went to C5, which is my preferred EC2 instance for doing some blockchain work, in particular, working with the Ethereum blockchain. So this is a good starting point to take a Node.js application and just use it for deployment and use this to test on Heroku and basically understand what the charges are and how much you're going to be charged, and then work your way up from there. If you're, again, I'll be doing a simple hello world application, but this can be easily scaled up. And in most cases, I will probably doing some further content covering this application with more sophisticated blockchain applications and so forth. So let's get started. Again, I have my EC2 instance up and I am going to do the installation. I have nothing installed at this point as usual. And as usual, I'm cut and pasting directly from my GitHub. So you'll be able to go to the GitHub below if you haven't already with some of my other videos and step through this in exactly the same fashion that I'm presenting it to you. So at this point, I'm doing a node source installation and I'm using the same version of Node version 20. Except in this case, we're going to be doing some extra installations for the Heroku CLI. Sorry, just an update. And now I'm going to, and as usual, I'm going to have all my references here, and I'm not going to go deep in the weeds on, let's say, a lot of the Unix particulars, as well as Node.js or how to work with any of the node source installations or in any of the more deep Unix related, but here just focus on the base mechanics of uploading to Heroku and testing it and going from there. Now I am assuming that you have an Amazon account, and I'm also assuming that you have at this point a Heroku account. I'll have some minimal instructions documented in a PowerPoint, but as you know, a lot of times some of the interfaces, both with Amazon or even a service, software as a service such as Heroku, the installation process or the new account process can vary, and it's not practical for me to step through completely from scratch. However, a lot of these processes are pretty intuitive, okay? And I'm going to be stepping through everything as usual, everything that you need to know to operate this between these two platforms. So here I'm completing the node source based installation. And again, I have earlier references to this. I'll try to include some of the node source explanations of how I installed Node. But again, I'm following in exactly the same fashion that I've done in earlier videos. So I'm completing the node. Now at this point, I'm going to have two other pieces of software to address, and that is Docker, because I'm going to be Dockerizing my Node application for this particular demonstration, as well as the Heroku CLI software. So the node just completed. And again, this is one of the benefits of working with C5 instances, that the installs go very fast. So everything looks okay from that angle. And I'm also going to install Express, because I'm going to put in a Node.js software and I'm going to test it locally. number one. Number two, I'm going to Dockerize it and test the Dockerized version. And number three, and finally do a Heroku deployment and configuration build and test it from the Heroku standpoint. But you want to step through, obviously, you don't want to deploy an application that doesn't work properly. So very quickly, it's not going to take a lot of time to go through those initial 2 steps, right? So I'm going to go through that. So here I just installed Docker, and that is an install that I have been doing on some of the earlier demonstrations. But again, what I want to do ultimately is take some of my larger applications and add this a tail end, or at least add the configuration steps to Dockerize and upload your demos to Heroku. And this is a great way to showcase your work or any kind of modifications, or hopefully some of the software demonstrations that I had, hopefully that inspired you to do some type of work. And then from that point, you could serve that on Heroku and point to that and allow other people to engage with that. So at this point, I installed the Heroku CLI. And these instructions are right out of the Heroku documentation as applied to Ubuntu. Of course, if you're going to be doing this on a Mac or Windows, your installations will vary. Another advantage that I have here is I'm doing everything Git-based, and Git is installed on the Ubuntu instance as well. So I got a slight warning here in terms of services change, and that's nothing new to worry about. Now at the Heroku install, okay, I had to do a force on that as well as a sudo. And that's what I had to do to get it to work on this instance. So once that's complete, we can check the version, and then we can move forward. So to do the push to Heroku, we have to do a login, and I'm going to do the login before we even pull in the necessary software to do the testing. And to do that, I have to generate a key from our Heroku site. And again, this is with the assumption that you have registered with Heroku an account. And at this point, 2024, you have to secure it with a credit card. And so far with this deployment, I will have one up running for a week or so, and they've given me a lot of free credits to run that. So what I would definitely encourage you to do is keep an eye on it. And there is usually a lot of gray area in what your exact costs are going to be as far as serving these applications on basically any cloud-based platform. So be careful, okay? And I usually step very, very lightly with this because you don't want to be surprised, okay? So here I have Heroku installed, and I have Node installed, and everything looks appropriate here. So now I'm going to do a login here, and I'm going to have to go to my Heroku login, which I am logged in over here on an alternative screen. And here it's going to prompt me for an email, and I'm going to put my email account, which I had registered with Heroku. And now I'm going to go to the Heroku site, and I'm going to create an authorization. And I can say test deploy. And at this point, I'm going to go off screen to grab that and copy that over. Okay, and I could put some little additional screenshots, put in a PowerPoint. But in the interest of not having any circumstance by which any of my password is shown here, I'm going to do that off screen here for a second. Okay, but it's pretty intuitive. You go into manage account and applications, and I will include those steps as well. So here it is giving me an authorization token. And again, I'm doing it off screen just for my protection, if nothing else. Okay, so I copied over into the password. Now remember, the password here is not your Heroku password. Okay, so don't be confused with that. This is an authorization that I have pulled over, an authorization token that I've generated. And I'm took that off screen, but I did the test deploy here and I did a create authorization there, and I could click into that. But again, I don't want to be showing that to you. I'll show you a little bit more details on a PowerPoint. I'll put it on the GitHub for your reference. Again, want to make sure that is confusing with some instructions that you may be led to believe that, oh, I should be putting in my Heroku password. It's not your Heroku password. It is your token, your authorization token that you generated from the Heroku account. Okay, so just make sure that you're clear on that and you'll be totally fine. Now here, it accepted that and it says, okay, I'm fine. I'm good to move forward. So I did everything under home Ubuntu. I'm going to create, and the reason I did it this way is I could create actually multiple directories or multiple projects and leverage Node and Express and Docker. In this case, I'm just going to do a single directory. In some cases that you've seen, I run this as a sandbox. I don't even create a project directory. In this case, it is important to make a project directory for the way that you have it configured to push it to Heroku. And I'll show that as we get into it. So we have two configuration files, one for Docker and one for Heroku. Now, everything associated with my particular example, again, I will be backing up my project directory and my project directory alone, not the node files and everything associated with that, and be storing an associated GitHub. So again, you could cut, paste, and you could duplicate it exactly the way that I'm presenting it to you, just in a similar fashion I've done with other recordings. The only exceptions are, of course, your own ID, usernames, and in this case, authorization token, right? So here I'm going to do a make directory, and I'm going to make a project directory. I'm going to call it Alfred, okay? And I'm going to go to it, okay? So there I am. So now I'm going to put in my files, and I have 5 specific files I'm going to pull in here. And again, I'm not going to be typing this all in there. I'm just going to do a cut paste, and I'm going to pull in first the Docker file. I'm going to create that. I'm using VI. Use whatever editor that you want, or you could even FTP it and push it into the associated directories. So I'm pulling in the Docker file, and we can step through this really quickly. I've associated for Node, and I said it's the latest version. There's a lot of variations that you could explore here. The latest works for me. I have an identifier associated with the Node 20 a little bit closer. I created a work directory inside the Docker file. I copy the package JSON. We'll define that in a second. You have to be careful about that. I do a run npm install. I copy the contents to the working directory, and I expose it to port 8080. Then interestingly, once it's served at Heroku, I don't have to put in the ports. The ports are already pre-configured for me. However, as I run it as a standalone Docker file, I have to, as I will show in a second, I have to associate that with the 8080 port to be able to test it out. And you want to do that incrementally, because if you push it up to Heroku and it doesn't work, then you can be scratching your head. So it's always good to have those intermediate steps. The command here, I'm going to do a node, and I'm calling my test hello world server written in Express Node.js. I'm labeling that as app.js. So that's my Docker file. And again, you want to use this for any other type of application. Your implementation is obviously going to vary, right? So now I'm going to pull my application file, and again, I call that app.js. And let me pull in that file here. Again, I'm pulling it off screen. And again, this is will be easily available to you, right? So you want to follow directly along. You could just copy it directly from my GitHub. So this is your garden variety Node.js Express application. Pull in Express, I instantiate an app, and I set up a server. I'm waiting for requests, and I'm going to pass back hello world. I can customize this, okay, just to make sure I'm not confusing this with any other type of hello world. Let me add a couple extra exclamation points, and One thing I had to change from some of the other demos that I saw, I had to do a process CMV port, and this was necessary to get it to work appropriately on the Heroku server, okay? Because I believe it was looking for the actual port, or didn't perhaps configure it directly to 8080, but this was necessary. Again, if you're going directly from this platform, provided that you don't do this 3 years in advance from the recording of this video, okay, this should work as advertised, right? So I'm gonna have console log app listening. So if you're familiar, okay, with basic Node.js, okay, it should be second nature. So I got the Docker file, I have the app.js, and I'm going to do a Heroku. I have to create a YAML file, okay, for Heroku. So I'm going to create that, and I'm going to pull that in directly. So let's take a look at that. So now this is necessary for the Heroku. Now there obviously could be more than one way to do it. I'm doing it from the perspective of uploading a Docker file. So I define it as a Docker file, and I do run node app.js. You want to make sure that, obviously, some of the obvious things is make sure that you're naming your files appropriately. If you don't use, you rename your server as something else, you have to make the necessary modification in the configuration file, right? Next is the package JSON. So this has a few other additions that you're gonna have to be careful about. So I'm gonna pull that in. I just created it. I'm gonna pull it in from my, now I can initialize the package. I can do an npm initialize. However, I just did it this way. Okay, so I just created my own package file by hand. Basically, this was created the express, but I made the addition here of scripts that's starting a node app.js. Okay, so this is necessary, and this is included in the Heroku project config. Okay, so I think I have everything here. I'm going to also put in a git ignore file. Okay, so this is going to ignore all my node modules, so they're not backed up appropriately, right? So I'm going to put in Docker, or not git ignore, rather Docker ignore. So I'm going to do a Docker ignore. As such. And I'm just going to put in these 2 lines here, node modules and npm debug. Yes, just like that. Very good. Now I'm going to do a build. Okay, I'm going to build my Docker file, and that is I run sudo docker build -t, and I had defined earlier directory as Alfredo, but I did Alfred, so I'm going to change that appropriately. So obviously I want to make sure that you're writing the directly appropriately. So here's, we did the Docker build, and it looks okay. Now I could do a node app.js as well, and I could test it from that perspective. I kind of preempted that by going into the Docker build. We'll just try the Docker. We could back it up and do a node app.js. In the interest of brevity, let's just go straight to the Docker file. Okay, and that's perhaps the most important part that we want to check here, right? So here I'm going to copy in the necessary means to run it directly. Oh, I misnamed that, right? Alfredo or Alfredo. So here I ran it, and this looks appropriate. So let's pull in now back to the world of AWS, right? So here I have, I just want to make sure that that you've done this right. The inbound rule has to be set, all traffic, and custom. Usually in the past, I've done IP4, IP6. IP4 will cover it. Okay, so I just save that rule. Otherwise, you're going to say a 404 error. It's not going to allow you to read that web server, right? So get back here, and now I can go to my DNS. I can take that Docker file that's running out of there, and I can just test it directly from Amazon. And it's just going to be my confirmation that my hello world, and there we go. So my server's up and running on my instance, and this basically tells me my Docker build is fine. My node server works, and I omitted that step you could do. If this didn't work, you might want to back up and make sure that you wrote the server appropriately and make any kind of errors in the configuration of that file, the app.js. But here, and I have the right version here because I had all those exclamation points there. So, so everything's fine. Okay. So now I can move to the build. So I'm going to do Heroku. So I installed Heroku CLI, and I tested that. So now I'm going to do a Heroku create, and I'm going to create my specific project. And I'm going to name it the same as my project directory. Okay, so Heroku create Alfred manifest. And it's complaining here. It says it's already taken. Okay. It may be complaining due to the an earlier run that I did. Okay, that configured that. So here I called it Alfred O, and that came back appropriately. So if you do multiple tests, as I did to get to this point, you may have separate projects already pushed up to, even though I had deleted this for whatever reason, it hasn't cleaned that out. So that's why I got that specific error. So now I have Git that's already installed with Ubuntu. Okay, so I'm going to do a Git init, and I'm going to do an add -a. This is going to grab everything and make sure that you're in the project directory to do this -a. And at this point, I'm going to do a commit. And I have all my files. So I have the Docker ignore Docker file, app.js, Heroku YAML, package.json. Everything looks good. I tested the Docker already, so at least that point. I haven't tested Heroku YAML because we haven't pushed it right. So I could run it off as the main branch. I might be able to get away without doing this, but this is kind of one of my steps I usually do when I'm pushing it up to a normal GitHub. Okay, so now I'm going to do a git remote command out of Heroku, and I am going to want to be consistent with my name, and I call it Alfredo, and I'm going to push that project or set up that project appropriately, and now I'm going to do a push. Okay, now in my case, contrary to some of the popular implementations that I've seen, I had to do a head master. Okay, or otherwise I was getting some kind of errors. And everything that I went through to get to this point, right, for this particular implementation, I have all my references, things I looked up, okay, to get through some of the demos that I had, which, as usual, right, there's always some type of slight issue to work through here. So let me do the push here, and watch it go through, and it does the build, and everything should be pushing up the project up to Heroku. All right, okay, let me pull up. I'm back in the Heroku world, and I have my test authorization here. Again, I am logged in as the user. Again, you have to register your own account, and most unfortunately at this point, you have to secure it with your credit information, right? So here I'm going to go to that. I'm going to the upper right and the design here. I clicked on there to get dashboard, and Alpha 15 was an older run that I had, and I just pushed up this Alfredo. Okay, so here I can click on that, and it says, okay, just push it up today and just now, and I can do an open app to see it run. And there we go. And just to be sure, right, I can just put it in from a blank browser tab and it'll come through. So here I was able to, from scratch, I completely started a fresh instance. I pulled in all the necessary files, Docker, Docker, Heroku YAML, and the Express Node.js file. And along with the installed Node.js Express and Heroku CLI, along with my associated account, I was able to push my project up to Heroku, and there you have it. So this is for the world to see. One thing, again, I would encourage you to do is I usually encourage everyone who touches a lot of these applications to monitor your costs. Okay, in this case, I'm not going to keep this up and running, so I'm going to go back in and select this. And in this case, I'm going to go to the settings. There we go. And down here, I can delete that app because I already have one running and I only need one to run, if that, right? So if you're not using it, delete it, okay? But this is a great starting point to start taking your applications and bringing them to the world, okay? So thanks for listening. I'm going to delete that app here. So thanks for listening. Subscribe if this helps, and like as well. So take care. Talk to you soon. Thank you.